어서 있는 고양이 제니예요. 오늘은 해리포터 3권 Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban Chapter 5 The Dementor 읽어보도록 할게요. 냐옹! Chapter 5 The Dementor. Tom woke Harry next morning with his usual toothless grin on a cup of tea. Harry got dressed and was just as praising the disgruntled Hedwig to get back into her cage. Ron banged his way into the room, pulling a sweatshirt over his head and looking irritable. "The sooner we get on the train, the better," he said. "At least I can get away from Percy at Hogwarts. Now he's accusing me of dropping tea on his photo of Penelope Clearwater. You know, Ron is his girlfriend. She's hidden her face under the frame because her nose had gone all blotchy." "I've got something to tell you," Harry began, but they were interrupted by Fred and George, who had looked into to congratulate Ron and infuriating Percy again. They hadn't gone to breakfast, where Mrs. Weasley was reading the front page of Daily Prophet with a furrowed brow, and Mrs. Weasley was telling Hermione and Ginny about a love potion she made as a gone girl. All three of them were a bit giggling. "What were you saying?" Ron asked Harry as they sat down. "Later," Harry muttered as Percy stormed in. Harry had no chance to speak to Ron or Hermione in the chaos of leaving. They were too busy heaving Ordale trunks down a leaky cauldron's narrow staircase and piling them up near the door with Hedwig and Hermes, Percy's street shawl, perched on top of their cages. A small wickerwork basket stood beside the Hagrid trunks, spitting loudly. "It's all right, Cloakshanks," Hermione cooed with a wickerwork. "I let you out on the train." "You won't," snapped Ron. "What about poor Scabbers, eh?" He pointed at his chest, where the large lump indicated Scabbers was curled up in his pocket. Mr. Weasley, who had been outside waiting for the mystery cause, stuck his head inside. "They're here," he said. "Harry, come on." Mr. Weasley marched Harry across the short stage of pavement towards the first of two old-fashioned dark green cars, each of which was driven by a 13-weekend wizard with a suit of emerald velvet. "In you get, Harry," said Mr. Weasley, glancing up and down the crowded streets. Harry got into the back of the car and was shortly joined by Hermione, Ron, and to Ron's disgust, Percy. The journey to King's Cross was very uneventful compared to Harry's trip on the night bus. The mystery of magic cars seemed almost ordinary, though Harry noticed they could slide through gaps to the Uncle Vernon's new company car. He certainly couldn't have managed. They reached King's Cross with 20 minutes to spare. The Mr. Drivers from the trolleys unloaded their trunks, touched their hats on Mr. Weasley, and drove away, somehow managing to jump to the head of an unmoving queue for the traffic lights. Mr. Weasley kept close to Harry's elbow all the way into the station. "All right then," he said, glancing around them. Let's do this in pairs as so many others. I'll go through first to Harry." Mr. Weasley strolled towards the barrier between platforms 9 and 10, pushing Harry's trolley, and apparently very interested in the Intercity 125 that had just arrived at platform 9. With a mimicful look at Harry, he leaned tearfully against the barrier. Harry imitated him. Next moment, they had fallen sideways through the solid metal onto platform 9 and 3/4 and looked up to see the Hogwarts Express, the skull-less steam engine, puffing smoke over a platform packed with witches and wizards, seeing their children onto the train. Percy and Ginny suddenly appeared behind Harry. They were panting, practically taking the barrier at a run. Ah, there's Penelope, said Percy, smoothing his hair and going pink again. Ginny caught Harry's eye, and they both turned away to hide their laughter as Percy strode over to a girl with the long, curly hair, walking with his chest thrown up so that she couldn't miss his shiny badge. Whilst the remaining Weasleys and Hermione had joined them, Harry and Mr. Weasley led the way to the end of the train, past pet compartments, to the carriage that creaked very lightly. They lunched straight, throwed Hagrid and Crookshanks in the luggage lab, then bent back aside to stay at Mr. Weasley. Mrs. Weasley kissed all her children, then Hermione, and finally Harry. He was embarrassed, but really quite pleased when she gave him an extra hug. "You take care, would you, Harry?" she said as she straightened up, her eyes oddly bright. Then she opened her enormous handbag and said, "I made you all sandwiches. Here you are on. No, they're not corned beef, Fred. And where's Fred? Here, dear." "Harry," said Mr. Weasley quietly, "come over here a moment." He jerked his head towards the pillar, and Harry followed him behind it, leaving the others crowded around Mr. Weasley. "There's something I got to tell you before you leave," said Mr. Weasley in a tense voice. "It's all right, Mr. Weasley," said Harry. "I already you." "You know? How could you know?" I heard you and Mr. Weasley talking last night. I couldn't help hearing," Harry added quickly. "Sorry." "That's not the way I'd have chosen people to find out," said Mr. Weasley, looking anxious. "No, honestly, it's okay. This way you haven't broken your wand to Fudge, and I know what's going on." "Harry, you must be very scared." "I'm not," said Harry sincerely. "Really," he added, because Mr. Weasley was looking disbelieving. "I'm not trying to be Harry, but seriously, Sirius Black can't be worse than Voldemort, can he?" Mr. Weasley flinched over the sign of the name, but overlooked it. "Harry, I knew you were, well, made of stronger stuff than Fudge seemed to think. I'm honestly pleased you're not scared, but—" "Arthur!" called Mr. Weasley, who was now shepherding the rest into the train. "Arthur, what you're doing is bad to go." "He's coming, Molly," said Mr. Weasley. But he turned back to Harry and kept talking in a lower and more hurried voice. "Listen, I want to give you a word. Then be a good boy and stay in the castle," said Harry grimly. "Not entirely," said Mr. Weasley, who looked more serious than Harry had ever seen him. "Harry, swear to me you won't go looking for Black." Harry stared. "What?" There was a loud whistle. Guards were looking around the train, slamming all the doors shut. "Promise, Harry," said Mr. Weasley, talking more quickly still. "Whatever happens." "Why would I go looking for someone I know wants to kill me?" said Harry blankly. "Swear to me that whatever you might hear—" "I think quickly!" cried Mr. Weasley. Steam was billowing from the train. It had started to move. Harry ran to the compartment door, and Ron threw it open and stood back to let him out. He leaned out of the window and waved at Mr. and Mrs. Weasley until the train turned the corner and blocked them from view. "I need to talk to you in private," Harry muttered to Ron and Hermione as the train picked up speed. "Go away, Ginny," said Ron. "Oh, that's nice," said Ginny huffily as she stormed off. Harry, Ron, and Hermione set off down the corridor looking for empty compartments, but all were full except for the one at the very end of the train. This only had one occupant, a man sitting fast asleep next to the window. Harry, Ron, and Hermione checked on the threshold. The Hogwarts Express was usually reserved for students and had never seen an adult bird before, except for the witch and preacher food trolley. The strangers were nearing extremely shabby set of wizard's robes, which had been down several paces. He looked ill and exhausted. Though quite young, his light brown hair was flecked with grey. "Who do you reckon it is?" He and Ron hissed as they stand then and slid the door shut, taking the seats furthest away from the window. "Professor R.J. Lupin," whispered Hermione at once. "How do you know that?" "It's on his case," replied Hermione, pointing the luggage leg over the man's head, where there was a small battered case, held together with a large quantity of neatly knotted string. The name Professor R.J. Lupin was stamped across the one corner in peeling letters. 재미있게 들으셨다면 구독과 좋아요 꾹꾹 눌러주시고 다음 영상에서 만나요. 안녕!